So we discussed a bunch of times that Biden has announced that he wants to pull out of Afghanistan fully by September 11th. That pushes back Trump's deadline, which was May 1st, but Trump wasn't actually going to withdraw all the troops. He was going to leave a residual force there. According to all the articles, Biden wants to fully withdraw on September 11th. Now, I don't like that he pushed back the timeline. I do like that we're talking about a full withdrawal, but I'll believe it when I see it because there's a million times they've said we're going to end the war and then we just didn't end the war. So, having said all that, we have another story here involving foreign policy that cuts in the other direction, which doesn't really jive with the story of him pulling out of Afghanistan. The Nation reports Biden wants to spend even more on defense than Trump. The president's plan to hike Pentagon spending draws a rebuke from progressives. So, Biden's proposing $715 billion for the Pentagon. $715 billion. To put that in perspective, that's an increase over Trump's $704 billion. So he wants to increase the military from Trump's levels. I mean, that's preposterous. We spend more than the next 12 biggest militaries combined, and most of them are our allies. And this is at a time when we have a pandemic and a depression. And you want to spend all this money on the military? Why? For what? What's the point? Because of corruption. Because, Biden's Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, I think that's his name, took over $1 million from sitting on the board of Raytheon, and now he's advising Biden on foreign policy. Gee, I wonder what position he's going to take. Is he going to be anti-war or is he going to be pro-war? So there's a lot of corruption going on here. There's a lot of say from the likes of Raytheon and Boeing and Honeywell and, all Lockheed Martin and all the other so-called defense contractors. And you have an increase in the military budget. I mean, that strikes me as beyond ridiculous. $12 billion more for weapons of war. I mean, this is our welfare in this country is warfare. We've built an economy on war, and we have jobs tied to the military-industrial complex in all 50 states. And so now, even under presidents who are nominally supposed to be more anti-war, clearly not. Listen, I hope he pulls out of Afghanistan. I hope that that's true. But we'll have to wait and see. And also, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Think about how if we cut the military, we could cut it 50% and still have the biggest military in the world by far. By far. Think about what we could do with all that money. It's beyond absurd. So, to put this in perspective for you, Data for Progress surveyed voters all across the country last year about budget priorities. Get this, 56% support cutting the Pentagon budget by 10% to pay for fighting the coronavirus pandemic and funding education, healthcare, and housing. 69% of Democrats expressed enthusiasm for that. Even 51% of Republicans said, yeah, cut the military 10%, use that to fund other priorities. Even the Republicans are saying that. We have a government that's so utterly disconnected from the will of the people, and we see it across the board. It's not just on foreign policy stuff. By the way, the war in Afghanistan is more unpopular than the Vietnam War at the height of its unpopularity at this point. It's like 20% or something ridiculously low. It might even be in the teens, 13%, 19%, something like that. But it's across the board. 80% of people want to raise the minimum wage. We haven't raised the minimum wage. Nearly 70% of people want to legalize marijuana at the federal level. We're not legalizing marijuana at the federal level. The list goes on and on. Of all the things where the people line up on one side and the government does the opposite. This is one of those things, man. All this money for endless war. This colossal bloated military budget at the same time. We have 80% of the country living paycheck to paycheck. Half of workers making $30,000 a year or less. We have tens of millions without health insurance. We have people desperately needing child care. That's another thing that should be universal. Universal child care would be wonderful. Many other developed countries have that. Instead, this is what we spend our money on. This is what we do. So, Biden wants an even bigger military budget than Donald Trump. beyond pathetic. Beyond pathetic. It should at least be $100 billion less. It should at least be from $705 billion to $605 billion, but no. Centrist Joe, right-wing Democrat, moderate Republican Joe, shows his true colors again.